Zelani, as well as the Chief Electoral Officer, Mosotho Miepja, and Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Ndate Saima Mabolo, and Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mema Suku. Afternoon and afternoon to everybody. Let me allow the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Ndate Mashinini, to proceed and share the results of the voter registration weekend with us. Thank you very much. Chairperson.
Thank you, Program Director Kate Bapela, fellow Commissioner, the Vice Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mr. Terry Tselane, the Chief Electoral Officer, Mosotho Miepja, and the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Sai Mamabulo, as well as Dr. Masugu. I don't know why she's run away from us. I also would like to take the opportunity to welcome our provincial electoral officers, as well as senior managers of the IEC, including our personnel, staff members present here, members of the Fourth Estate, fellow South Africans, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon, and thank you very much for you being with us here, and greetings to all those at home listening to this report. And my job today is probably the easiest and the most simple one ever since I took the office of the Chair of the Electoral Commission. Our focus today is to make an announcement, and I'm going to announce only three things. The things I'm going to announce is, the first one is good news, the second one is good news, and the third one is good news again.
Okay, we have.
The Electoral Commission is very pleased to report that over 3 million South Africans voters visited the voting stations over the past weekend of registration. This is a phenomenal achievement and is more than double the activity recorded during the first registration weekend for the previous municipal elections of 2011. It also represents 23% higher than overall activity during the first registration weekend in the 2014 national and provincial elections. The Electoral Commission would like to express its deepest gratitude and appreciation to all the 3 million plus voters who heeded the call and national patriotic appeal for them to visit our voting stations and register or update their registration details. Of these 3 million visitors or voters that came, approximately 693,000 were new registrants, and approximately 1.9 million were re-registrations in the new voting districts. As we all know, ladies and gentlemen, we've had demarcation changes that affected the voters. And lastly, of that number, that is 1.3 million visited to confirm and update their registration details so as to ensure that they were in full compliance with the Electoral Act and the courts. Almost 700,000 new registrations broke down as follows. The 544,000 plus were under the age of 30. We thank the young people of South Africa who heeded this particular call for them to have come forward and register. And further, also KwaZulu-Natal had almost 24%, which is almost 166,000 people who came to actually our voting stations. This was the highest number of people who turned up, and they were followed by Gauteng with almost 156,000, which represents about 22.5%. Together, these accounted for almost half of all new registrations. They came from these two provinces. And almost 54% of new registrations were women, which also is reflective of the demographics of our country. We also like to say, siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi abantu besifazane baphume ngobuningi babo. In terms of the provincial activities, KwaZulu-Natal had the highest overall registration activity with 864,000 plus interactions that were recorded. That is now people who did come and check and those who did do the re-registration. And once more again, they were followed by Gauteng with almost 527,000, which represents about 17%. And the third was the Eastern Cape, which came at also about 17%, and the number was around 520,000. The Electoral Commission is especially pleased with the response by the young people to register as the first-time voters. We had set out ourselves a target of 1 million new registrations ahead of the 2016 municipal elections, and this weekend has made a huge stride in achieving this, with nearly 3/4 of that number already in our books as registered voters. We are confident we are on track to meet and even exceed this target after our planned second and final registration weekend. In this regard, the Electoral Commission is pleased to announce that there will be a second and a final registration weekend, which will take place on the weekend of take place on the 9th and the 10th of April 2016. All the 22,569 voting stations will again be open that weekend, and this will be between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. for the people of South Africa to come and register, and for those who are already on the roll, for them to update their registration details. The Electoral Commission will be doing all it can over the coming weeks to encourage as many eligible voters as possible to make use of this last opportunity of registration and updating details at their voting stations. And re-registration, we also would like to make people aware that re-registration is an ongoing activity. Any time between now until we close the roll, people would be eligible to also go to the IEC offices at their local municipalities on Monday to Friday, and ensure that they can actually update or register their details. And in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the Electoral Commission wishes to thank all South Africans for having responded so positively to the call to register and to update their details. The results of this weekend bode well for the participation in the upcoming municipal election and the future of the democracy of our country. And we would also like to thank the members of the media for their fantastic support and coverage of this particular weekend registration. And it is safe to say that very few people in South Africa were unaware of the registration activity. And the Electoral Commission is also grateful for the cooperation. It's also grateful and indebted for the cooperation and support from the various political parties who were part of the process and the leaders in helping to drive the message of the registration. And many of them were hard at work crisscrossing the country this weekend, ensuring that the voters of all political persuasions were encouraged to vote. A special word of thanks also to the Department of COCTA and Department of Home Affairs for all the efforts that they made in support of the Electoral Commission. And this also includes the interministerial committee that was involved with the security matters, also with the communication, and the drive for people to go and collect their IDs, and those who have their IDs still uncollected, there was a major drive as well to get them to come forward. We also would like to make our special appreciation to the national and provincial joints for their security and stability and logistics support. And we thank all those men and women in uniforms who came out and ensured that we actually protect and defend the constitution of this country, that is the right for the people to vote. And we also appeal to all our people that have their grievances, that have their concerns, that the Electoral Commission has taken note of those particular concerns, and we are going to be engaging the appropriate authorities. But we appeal that we need to do these things peacefully. And lastly, the Electoral Commission is also grateful to the more than 50,000 electoral officials who worked tirelessly over the weekend to serve and assist our country. And once more again, we are very proud for everybody's effort towards this. And I also would like to thank the fellow commissioners who were out there on the road and making sure that they support the CEO and the administration in ensuring that we have a successful registration. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me allow questions from the floor, questions of clarification, and any other question. Introduce yourself, your name, as well as the media house, and then we'll allow the panel to take some of these issues. I'm ready for any question. All right. Proceed. Thank you.
Do you have an update on voting stations where problems occurred? When it comes to voting stations that either did not open at all or were not open on the first day of registration?
Can I take another question? Let's look at the question from Million Guardian. Problem voting stations.
We were still trying to check information from the Deputy CEO responsible for operations. And his estimation is that the numbers that did not open is roughly around 40. 40, yes. And I think it is important for me to emphasize this issue that this is out of 22,570 voting stations that we have in the country.
Thank you very much. Any other question before we wrap up the afternoon? After an incredible weekend, yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry, my name is Anna John from IEC. Can you explain to us what is the most common problem in those voting? Why we're not able to vote?
You know, I must start off by saying that the question is a very interesting one from the point of view of if one looks at the stations that never opened at all, you will find that, you know, and my colleague is right, the number is no more than 40. But many of the stations actually opened and closed, and, you know, there was that activity. There are three broad categories of why we had challenges. One was community protest in respect of service delivery as we understand them. The second one It's in respect of demarcation issues, as we understand those. And the third one were issues within communities relating to candidature in the upcoming elections, which we understood were matters that members of the community were engaging with their political parties. Those are broadly the three areas of protests that we have met with over the weekend.
Perhaps just to actually emphasize a particular point is that with respect to all those incidences where we were not able to actually conduct the activities, they primarily were not due to the Electoral Commission. Where we had control, we've actually executed to the best of our ability. And for that, we commend everybody that was a part of the electoral staff of the Commission.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Michelle from SABC News. Just to follow up on the question surrounding protest, I just want to know from the IEC's perspective, going forward, are you going to perhaps maybe look at working with even if it's the South African police services to try to prevent any similar kind of disruptions where we see protests spilling over and property being damaged, IEC property being damaged during upcoming voter registration periods?
Yes, the Vice Chair will respond to that.
It is important for us to emphasize this issue, that in all the areas where there are protests, the first prize for us is a negotiated settlement with the communities and the leaders who are operating in those areas. As a result of that, all our officials who are on the ground are using all the mechanisms that we've got as an electoral commission to engage with those communities in order to try to find an amicable solution. Of course, in a situation where we are not able to get the cooperation from leaders or communities do not necessarily have identifiable leaders, we would have to work very closely with law enforcement agencies to make sure that our people are allowed an opportunity to participate in the process. We have a working relationship thus far, and it has been working very well with South African police services, and will continue to engage with the relevant authorities to make sure that we can find the information that we can be able to use for the purpose of making sure that our registration succeeds.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Connor, yes?
Can you just give us those areas? Which areas of those
Yeah, on those areas, Connor, those areas are already on our website. We released them last week when we issued the voter registration weekend statement. So they're already listed. You'll pick them up from there. Any other question, Tate? Yes.
Thanks. First, Long Chata from Progressive Independent News Agency. First, I must apologize for arriving late. But one of the challenges that I actually, as well as a voter or as a person who wanted to register, was one that my voting station is about 700 meters away from my house. And I've been voting there for the past, since 2006 when I permanently settled here in Pretoria. And when I got there, I was told that now I must go vote at another I must go and register at another voting station, which I believe most people have experienced in this voter registration weekend. And how are you planning to actually correct that in future? Because I had to now drive about 6-8 kilometers now to another voting station where my voting station where I voted throughout was about 500 meters away from my house.
We'll mess this
This is
Everyone can deal with this one. I think it's melodramatic.
Yeah.
There's no 7 kilometers.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Yeah, I think this is important for us to emphasize. And as the chairperson has just indicated that in urban areas, you really don't walk for more than 7 kilos to go to a voting station. However, the issue that you are raising is important because there are people who've been wrongly registered. And we have taken this opportunity to try to correct the details of people. Because in the past, what people used to do, like you're doing, is to go to the nearest voting station. That nearest voting station when you look at the address, you may find that the address is actually outside the boundary of that voting station. So it is important for people to update their details and then go and register within their voting district. We don't register people according to proximity of a voting station. We use the boundaries of our voting district to make a determination. You could be having the nearest voting station, but that voting station could actually be in a different ward, which would actually make you to be registering using an address that is wrong in a different ward. So it is important for us to keep on emphasizing this issue, that people have got to register in their voting district. Now, the area that we are referred to by our electoral staff, it's the correct one where you are supposed to be registering within your voting district.
All right, IEC Deputy Chair there, Terry Talani, saying that only 40 of the voting stations were unable to open over the weekend, so that just the media briefing, the Q&A session after that media briefing after the weekend of voter registration. So IEC Chair Glenn Mashinini reporting back on this weekend's registration, saying that they are on track to reach their goals. He said that over 3 million South Africans visited the voter registration centres. Over 600,000 of those were new registrations. He said that in KwaZulu-Natal they had the largest number of new voters who registered. He also thanked young people who came out for new registrations. And in terms of the protests seen over the weekends at various voter registration centres, he says that they will address the concerns that over these protests, but that they are building a successful voter registration campaign, and they are getting ready for the next voter registration weekend. Well, that is where we leave it for today.
Everybody for coming through this afternoon to the Elections House. We're starting again the final drive for voter registration weekend. And like the chairperson said, thank you, a huge thank you once more for the brilliant partnership the past weekend. We're bracing ourselves and getting ready for the weekend of 9 and 10 April 2016, final voter registration weekend. Thank you very much and drive safely. Chair, you're going to do a Zulu interview. Yeah, you'll come this side to come and talk.